Today, the Church celebrates the memorial of St. Teresa of the Child Jesus. And Teresa of Avila, as she's well known, was a woman who sought to reform the Carmelite order, and in doing so, bring it back to its roots, bring it back to its original intention of serving those in the community, especially the poor, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, of whom Jesus alludes, to whom Jesus alludes in today's gospel when he speaks of giving alms, when he recognizes that we are called to have, as our church tells us, a preferential option for the poor, to see Christ in them and to be Christ for them. And it was not without difficulty that Teresa undertook this mission. It is not without its challenges. In fact, she was coming back from a particular meeting, going back to the convent one evening, one rather stormy evening, and she fell from her, as the story is told, she fell from her horse and slipped down an embankment into a pile of mud. And then cleaning herself off, she looked up to the heavens to her Savior and said, "Well, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few of them." One of my favorite stories, probably my favorite story of Teresa. And indeed, it shows her humanity as well. That story shows her humanity and a recognition that she and God were in a partnership, that she could not do any of this without her relationship, first and foremost, with her loving God, who called her to this work, and who calls us to the work of building up the kingdom as well, in whatever way we can, of reaching out to the poor, the disenfranchised, the marginalized in many ways, and to bring Christ to others and to see Christ in others. It is indeed through this work that we are called to be church and to build up the church of God. And as Jesus is encountering the Pharisees who were prescribers of the law, so often were so fixated with the law, the letter of the law, that they forgot about the spirit of the law. They were so fixated, if you will, analogously with the outside of the cup, that they forgot about the inside of the cup, of one's heart and soul, where desires, both good and evil, reside. And we can indeed be clean on the outside and need washing, need cleansing on the inside, of being freed from those things that are not of God, and to be freed of what I often refer to as the spiritual deadwood that might reside in our hearts, and to clear that way and to make room for the goodness of God, to make room for God's infinite goodness and love that we are called not only to share in ourselves, but to share with those around us. Teresa of Avila, Teresa of the Child Jesus, is one who is a wonderful example of that, of faith, fidelity, and love to God's plan in her life, and in her acts of reformation, of reforming the order, and her actions of bringing the Carmelites together under one rule, to recognize the opportunity that God gave to them, to the order, to be church for all. She recognized that even in the midst of the difficulties, maybe especially in the difficulties and the challenges, God was ever present in her life, and she was unafraid to challenge those in authority, much like Jesus is unafraid to challenge the authorities of the day, to recognize the goodness of God inherent in all peoples, and to celebrate that goodness with all whom we meet.